Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Liz, for that welcome. What I'd like to do in the next 12 to 15 minutes is to really ask the question about the super retirement income challenge. How do we stack up? How does Australia stack up? And I'm going to do this in a couple of ways. Firstly, we're going to have a brief look at the Melbourne Mercer Global Pension Index, which compares retirement income systems in 25 countries. And then I'm going to look at 10 principles of an ideal retirement system that Mercer and the CFA Institute have developed globally, and see how we stack up against those as well. To begin with, let's recognise that retirement incomes is a multi-pillar approach. The World Bank has developed these pillars. We often call it 3 pillars in Australia, but there's actually 5. The first one is a base pension, the second one social security, then we've got 2 in private savings, either compulsory or voluntary, and then we've got the final pillar, which is support for the elderly outside pensions. Now, we should recognise in the Australian space that we do not have social security like the Americans or many European countries. We have the means-tested age pension, so we don't have that pillar. The final pillar that we have outside the pension system includes housing, includes family support, important in many Asian countries. So we need to recognise that we are not talking about a single pillar in the Australian system. We are actually talking about several pillars. So when we compare retirement income systems around the world, what do? How do we compare 25 systems that are so different from each other? Firstly, we ask some fundamental questions. We ask about adequacy. Is it providing reasonable benefits? Or what do you get out of the system? And when I talk about the system, I go beyond super. I include social security, the age pension, and provisions beyond those. Then we want to ask the question about sustainability. Can it keep delivering? Many countries, like Australia, are facing an ageing population. So can it keep delivering in the next 20, 30, 40 years? And the third type of question we ask is, do you trust it? Does it have integrity? Because if you're saving money over 50 years, you want to be able to trust the system. Now, I'm not going to bore you with great details about the global index today. Just to highlight the fact that we look at more than 40 questions broken down into adequacy, sustainability and integrity. The 2014 report is available on the web. The 2015 report will be released next month. So I'm not going to break any embargoes today. The 2014 results, Denmark was the only A-grade country in the world. Australia came in second, followed by the Netherlands in the bronze medal position. Why am I telling you this? We have a challenge ahead of us, but we've got to recognise the Australian system is pretty good on a global scene. It's good because we cover most of our employees, although not the self-employed necessarily, and we've already got $2 trillion set aside for the future. We have a very good system in terms of a regulated system, and most people are involved, although we could engage our members a little bit more. It also highlights the fact that we're ahead of the pack. If you look at countries we often compare ourselves with, Canada, the US, the UK, we are doing better than they are doing. Does it say we've got everything right? Absolutely not, but we're not doing badly. The next thing I want to look at is 10 principles that Mercer and the CFA Institute have developed called an ideal retirement system. We were looking at the global systems again around the world and developed 10 principles that we can benchmark systems against. Not only in the developed countries, but in the emerging or developing economies as well. They are somewhat aspirational. We're not there yet, but we think we can get there in many countries. The first one will be familiar to you: to develop clear objectives for the whole retirement system. I won't read all the points out, but you will notice in the Australian system, we have our 4 pillars, if you like: the pension, compulsory super, voluntary, and savings outside. So what are the objectives of each pillar within our system? Financial system inquiry suggested that we outline the objectives. That's already been mentioned today, and I would endorse that wholeheartedly. We need to know the why and the what we are trying to achieve, not just that it's happening. What's the direction? Where are we going? The second principle is that we should have a minimum level of funding for everyone in the workforce. Indeed, it's broader than the workforce, and in terms of Australia, we're not yet there. We do not cover the self-employed, and we do not cover those outside the workforce. People on parental leave, people on disability leave, other people receiving income support. Those people should receive, in our view, superannuation contributions for the future. They are out of the workforce for the moment for a variety of reasons. At the moment, most of them get no super contributions. The third principle is that there should be cost-effective and attractive default arrangements before and after retirement. Following Jeremy's report, we now have MySuper in Australia. That's pretty good before retirement. We're still developing the post-retirement principle. Whether it should be default or not, we can have a debate in this country, but we need to make it simple for our retirees. The fourth principle is about costs. Administration and investment costs should be disclosed. We're not fully there yet in Australia. We could do that a lot better. And there should be some competition in the system to encourage better pricing and fair pricing. The fifth principle is flexibility. We need to recognise that we are developing a retirement system, and in retirement, at retirement, during retirement, we're in a variety of circumstances. Health-wise, income-wise, partner or no partner, housing, no housing, etc. We need to recognise that, so one answer doesn't fit everybody. We need to be flexible in retirement. And broadly in Australia, we're not bad. The account-based pension, the most popular product, is flexible, but we haven't solved, I believe, the longevity solution space yet. We need to think about that more than we have. The sixth principle is that the system should have an income focus. We are about retirement income. We are not providing lump sums in retirement. But we also need to recognise that, and we've put the figure up there, 20 to 40%, should be accessible as a capital sum during retirement for a whole host of reasons linked to that flexibility argument. So you need money for medical operations, you need money for refurbishment of the home, maybe paying off some debt, whatever it is, there needs to be flexibility. 100% going into an annuity or an income product is not the ideal answer. The seventh principle, and one we don't need to worry about in Australia, is there should be immediate vesting. That is, contributions paid in on your behalf are available for you, and you don't need to stay with your employer for 10 or 20 years before you get them. So I'll move straight on to the next one, which is a bit more controversial in Australia, and that is taxation support. Taxation support from the government should be there in an equitable and sustainable way. Now, Chris Bone has already mentioned that. Our system at the moment is not as fair as it could be. But let me also make a comment of taxation and the CEDA recommendations about taxing superannuation and housing in the same way. I think they need to be taxed differently because they're two very different issues. In housing, you own it straight away, it's yours. In superannuation, you don't have access to it for 30, 40 or 50 years. Housing you live with, you live in. Super you don't use. You need to be compensated for that lack of access. The other thing about superannuation is there is a component of sharing in superannuation. Whether it's in the defined benefit scheme or whether it's in a longevity pooled product or insurance before retirement, you are in it with others. There is a component of pooling or sharing. That's not present in a house which you fully own yourself. So they are different. I'm not commenting here on how housing should be taxed. I'm just making the point that they're quite different from each other. The ninth principle is that the governance of pension plans should be independent of employers and government. Now, in Australia, we've basically got there, although I think we can communicate with our members in a better way than we have in the past. And finally, we should have appropriate regulation, whether that's through APRA and ASIC in Australia. We do that pretty well on the global scene. So, what are some recommendations for improvement? We're well regarded, we stack up well, but there are ways that we should go forward to make the system even better. We should confirm the major objectives of the system. Let's be very clear on what we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. Secondly, we should have a clear focus on lifetime incomes in retirement. It's not just incomes for the next 10 years, it's incomes while we're alive. And furthermore, it's not there for bequests. So it's lifetime incomes. We should ensure that all contributions lead to an improved outcome for the individual. Now, you might say that's obvious, but with the change in the assets test that the government's recently introduced, it's not clear that always an extra dollar put in will give me an extra dollar in retirement. We must make it very clear that what I put in voluntarily will give me more in retirement. That makes it a simpler system. And we should ensure that the interrelationships between super, the age pension and tax are transparent, are consistent and are fair. That comes back to the objectives of the system. So to finalise, and to move on to the other speakers, we've already heard about a dignified retirement. Chris and I hadn't compared notes, but we both used the same words. We might want to make sure that Australians retire with dignity. Secondly, we want to provide adequate lifetime income benefits in retirement. Third, we want to make sure that the long-term costs to government, tax concessions and the age pension combined are sustainable. Fourthly, we want a fair system within a generation and between generations. It's both, because superannuation is cross-generational. And finally, and this is one that is a bit aspirational because I think we're a long way from this, is that we want a simple system. A system that is simple for members, a system that is simple for employers and administrators and for super funds. I think these objectives would give us all improved understanding. We would know better what the system's trying to achieve. It would encourage appropriate behaviour by members in the system, and I think it would deliver much better outcomes for all of us. Thank you.